Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain podcast. I am here today with my friend, Dr. Nathaniel Frank. Welcome, Nathaniel.
Great to be here, Sean.
Thrilled to have you. So I will say by way of introduction, Nathaniel is an author, historian, and science writer, and his latest forthcoming book will be published by the Mayo Clinic Press, which is, of course, all about neuroplastic pain and mind-body healing. The Mayo Clinic, which I will just say as a note, is in the state of Minnesota, and it is, of course, considered one of the premier medical institutions in the United States. So Nathaniel is bringing this mind-body work that we do into the center of the professional medical conversation, and he is doing so much work to help more people find this stuff. And Nathaniel is also my friend who lives in Brooklyn, and we legit hang out for real. So welcome, Nathaniel.
We really do, and it's fun. It's fun. Always fun.
Truly. Anything else you want to add by way of introducing yourself to the listeners?
Just that I'm really excited to be here. I remember first hearing of you and then your podcast, and I think this has been a long time coming. I don't know if I was resistant. I don't know if you sensed that, or just that I think we were genuinely busy and you had a queue of great guests. So I'm glad to be here. And I think just to add that another hat I wear is as an LGBTQ researcher and advocate. And so we'll probably talk about the intersection today of that and mind, body, pain, and illness.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess it's maybe sort of obvious. Nathaniel is also gay. I'm like, would we be friends if if that were the case?
And is it obvious conceptually, or like, do I sound gay?
No. Although that's something that I think about a lot, is like gay voice doing my podcast. Obviously,
there's a documentary called "Do I Sound Gay?" Something like that.
I've seen it. Well, no, I think I've seen maybe like a YouTube trailer for it, but I know what you're talking about.
Worth checking out.
Yeah. But okay, why don't we get into talk to us about your own journey? I mean, we'll get into it. Nathaniel's like an OG Dr. Sarno patient, so like wherever you want to start, take us into your journey with chronic pain and symptoms.
That's right. I was a Dr. Sarno patient myself 20 some years ago, but who's counting? So where to begin? I guess by profession, I'm an academic researcher and a science writer, which for me includes the social sciences, which is the kind of writing I do. And so I try to work at the intersection of scholarship and the policies and practices that affect real lives. And what I like to do is use knowledge to make lives better. And one of the reasons that I got into both LGBTQ equality issues as well as mind-body pain issues is that they share in common the importance of knowledge and expression and authenticity as a path to health and well-being. And when I was coming out as gay shortly after college in the 1990s, I was appalled that I was learning so much about how gayness was something you couldn't talk about. And if you couldn't talk, I mean, we had a gay rights movement for some decades at that point, but in the 90s, it was still very stealth in most cases and very shameful. And I was graduating college just at the time that the military passed its Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. So for some of your younger listeners, that was a policy between 1994 and 2011 that required soldiers to pretend they were not gay in order to serve in the military. So you, Sean, have talked eloquently about the trading in authenticity for acceptance and attachment and safety, and how damaging that can be for LGBTQ people and for anyone, of course. And that's something that I saw was what that policy embodied. And so I built a career around researching and fighting against that policy. And over time, I had a personal experience of my own pain and illness around the same time that I was coming out and beginning graduate school, which was a very stressful time. And it started to occur to me as I learned about the mind-body roots of chronic pain that there were similar origins to the health and well-being challenges for LGBTQ people and for the 60 some million Americans who suffer from chronic pain and illness. So while my story may have unique aspects and we may focus on the LGBTQ component here, the hope is that some of the particulars are echoed as larger dynamics that are applicable to really everyone, but sometimes by drilling down on the particulars of someone's story, you can cast those dynamics into high relief and learn more about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, tell us more about your
So,
story.
right, I didn't get into the Sarno aspect. So, in graduate school, I went to graduate school for history. It was edifying. I'm glad I did, but it was stressful. It was lonely. Graduate school tends to be or can be. And it was also a time that I was coming out just after college, and I developed back pain and wrist and hand pain in the first or second year of graduate school. And like so many people, I assumed that this was an instance of overuse, crouching over the computer for too long. I had two very minor car accidents, and then I thought that that had exacerbated or caused them because the timing in your mind can get all discombobulated. And then you sit down and go
Right.
back and look at the timing and you realize, oh, that story I had told doesn't really track because the cause and effect don't
Right.
work. This has been a thing
Right.
for a lot longer than the car accidents. And the back pain was upper back pain for the most part. And so some of it spread to the neck. And these are common neuroplastic symptoms that most of your listeners know about now. The idea that if they move around and if they're inexplicable or unexplained, and if there are many different ones, then it's all the more likely that it's neuroplastic. But of course, I didn't know that at the time, and I went through the whole workup and all the doctors and all the diagnoses and cubital tunnel syndrome and decubital tunnel syndrome, which I thought, well, isn't that the opposite of what the last doctor gave me? How is that possible?
That's
That
I've actually never heard that term
I
before.
don't
That's a new
honestly know
one.
what decubital tunnel syndrome is, but it's a thing, or at least it's a label. There's a lot of those. Um, so fast forward a few years, and a friend, actually a boyfriend at the time, told me about seeing this segment on ABC News about this doctor at NYU who addressed chronic pain using a mind-body lens, and I was open to it on paper, right? So a lot of people are very resistant, take umbrage at the idea that someone may suggest that their pain has mind-body roots or is stress-related or is rooted in emotions. I didn't have trouble with that. My father is a psychiatrist, my mother's a social worker, um, and so on paper, those things were fine to me, but you realize over time with this that it's one thing to say on paper, "Oh, I'm open to this," and another thing for it really to sink in emotionally and at a nervous
It
system
is so
level. Yeah,
true.
yeah,
There are so many levels which I am still working through.
right?
There are so many
Right.
levels. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that because I think that's helpful for listeners to hear that from someone who's been in this field for a long time. Yeah, like you can be open to it at the top level, great, and there's still more levels up beneath that.
Right, because there's so much resistance and because the emotional brain is very different from the cognitive brain, and a lot of us who suffer from these ailments are quite cognitive, for lack of a better word. We're really in our heads, we're really in our brains, and of course, the brain is uh, the culprit behind all symptoms, all pain, all illness is a matter of the brain's interpretation of often very real, very physical things, sometimes not. Um, but there's a difference between the cognitive brain and the emotional brain. And that's one of the things that's so exciting and fruitful about about Sarno's approach and then the newest generation of neuroplastic treatments is a real understanding and a real compassion for that fact that it's one thing to know something on paper and another thing for it to seep into your veins, to your emotional brain, and that there are ways to do that. And good coaches and therapists like you, Sean, I'm sure, although you've never coached me except over dinner, can help people get to that, and so it can take time, it can take time, and it did take time for me, but I did go see John Sarno because I lived in New York, and I thought, "What do I have to lose?" I got on a wait list. This was around the year 2000, and he put me into a lecture he had me go to his lecture series where he explained the psychological and physical or physiological aspects of mind body pain. He did the workup, he did the physical exam. He said, yes, this is what he called TMS. Your listeners know. And
Hmm.
it was reassuring. He put me into the lecture series. And then, because I was a special case, he put me into the group therapy with Arlene Feinblatt, who was his chief lieutenant psychologist, who was and is one of the best psychologists out there. And she ran a group therapy session for just 8 weeks. It was finite on purpose because she was not messing around. And she used to say,
I
yeah,
find Arlene Feinblatt so intimidating.
yes,
I've never met her in real life.
I,
If I did, I think I would crumble.
she's amazing. I think in my book, I call her intense but compassionate. There's some real
Beautiful.
tough love there, but she is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it was just 8 weeks because I remember at one point, I forget if this was something I said or something a fellow patient said in the group, but she was trying to encourage us to get in touch with our embodied emotions, which is, of course, what they teach. And if it was me, I said, I'm trying. I'm trying. And she said, trying isn't enough. And I know that sounds sort of harsh in this context, but it was
But she's
exactly
trying to
it was
help you get
right.
better.
And that's why it was on.
And she's not
She's not
wrong.
wrong, and that's why it was only 8 weeks. She was like, "We only have
Yeah.
5 more weeks. We only have 3 more sessions." So
Right. Don't mess around.
she was not, and this
Yeah.
was, sure enough, the only thing that worked. I had done everything else, including all the alternative treatments and the physical therapy, the chiropractors, the acupuncturists. Um, some of it helped a little, but nothing helped until this, and it reduced my symptoms by about 50%, so it didn't heal me fully. And then I sort of, and this is common too, where people have different phases of life of neuroplastic recovery. I kind of hummed along like that for years and thought, okay, this was better than anything else. And I was no longer as scared to like lift a book, uh, right? To read a
Right.
book on
Right.
a subway.
Lifting up a
Right.
paperclip.
I could read a book in bed. And so I was kind of
Right.
fine, but I still had all the irritations of most of those symptoms, along with some new ones, stomach ailments and sciatica that I hadn't had before. Um, and then, so as not to get too long on the story, fast forward some number of years, and I had a resurgence of some of the back pain in a different place. And this was 2018. And I decided to Google Sarno and see what was up on that front. And I realized he had died a year before. He died in 2017, but that there was this whole world of disciples of people who were carrying his work forward, expanding it, researchers, neuroscientists, MDs, coaches who had taken his work and run with it. I met his daughter, Christina, who I know has been on this podcast, and we became
Mhm.
friends. And I told Sarno when I met him that I wanted to write a book on this. And he said, say what? Because that was exciting at the time. And it took me 25 years, but that's what I'm doing. And so it's always fascinated me. It always helped me. It didn't cure me right away. I still struggle. I'm one of those murky middle cases. There's still things, but the back pain. When I got back in touch with his disciples, and one of them was Howard Schubner, and another was Nicole Sachs. I know these are very familiar names. Their programs worked wonders. And the back pain that had debilitated me in 2018 and 19, I could barely walk the dog, went away in about a month or two by engaging in some of the exercises, in particular from Howard Schubner's very rudimentary online course. Um,
Mhm.
and that takes us to today. I started writing some articles about this and turned that into a book proposal. Mayo Clinic took it, and I'm now also a board member of the ATNS, where I chair the communications committee, and we try to talk about how to spread the word. So I think that covers my story for the moment. Maybe there will
Yeah.
be follow-up
Yeah.
questions.
Awesome. Well, so talk to us more about what you do now, like with the ATNS, also with wherever you want to take this with the ATNS, or also with the book, because that is huge. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if people know how big of a deal this is, and I feel like you're underselling it. To have a book published about neuroplastic pain in like through the Mayo Clinic's press is massive. So actually, no, let's go with that. Tell us about
Yeah.
that because that's
Yeah,
huge.
good question, and I appreciate you helping me sell myself, better than maybe sometimes I
Yeah,
do.
let's sell
I
this
I
stuff.
I agree. It's a really, really important bridge from what we're talking about to conventional medicine, or I guess from conventional medicine to the neuroplastic lens. I'm very careful never to call neuroplastic conditions alternative because it's not alternative medicine. This is simply what we think is the new frontier in understanding and treating pain. Um, and so
Agreed.
in many cases, including at the Mayo Clinic, and they have, wonderful um, pain clinics both in Minnesota and I believe at their other locations in Florida, and they have a third one escaping me where.
I think it's in
Yes,
Arizona,
that's right.
maybe?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Um,
They go where, like, the old folks retire is what they
right,
do, but the OG is in
right,
Minnesota.
and that's the big one, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they're such a great resource, and I'm so grateful that they took on this book because it's not so what I was gonna say is that m many health organizations and institutions and hospitals have some aspect of the mind-body approach to their treatment of pain, but it can be adjacent and not full throttled. And sometimes they talk about it as integrative medicine, or it used to be called alternative medicine. Um, it's an understanding that, well, yes, the mind matters and lifestyle matters and behavior matters, and it's all part of the mix. And so you have to eat well and you have to reduce stress, and that can involve yoga and it can involve tai chi, and all of these things are true. And yet if you don't have a full throttled understanding of the neuroscience of what is and is not happening in your body and your mind when you're suffering from chronic pain, assuming that it's neuroplastic, which most of it is, in my not so
Right.
humble opinion. If you don't have that
Yes.
understanding, then these sort of mind body adjacent approaches are only gonna get you so far, Yes, it's important to reduce stress and to learn new ways to respond to stress and to relax and to change your lifestyle, and diet is very important, but understanding neuroscience education and achieving nervous system regulation through this understanding as well as through emotional practices that get your emotions up and out. All the stuff you talk about on this podcast are crucial to recovering from neuroplastic pain and illness. And most institutions, even the ones that are fairly good about being progressive on the front of mind body medicine, don't go far enough, and they continue to sometimes tout um, treatments or procedures or medications that don't have a lot of research behind them and that can be ineffective or counterproductive. Um, Now, I'm not saying that about Mayo Clinic, or at least I shouldn't be saying that about Mayo Clinic if they
Well,
uh,
you listen, I mean, it's a big part of a lot of people's stories actually, is like, I went to Johns
right,
Hopkins, I went to the Mayo
yeah,
Clinic, and they couldn't figure it out, and then I read Dr. Sarno's book, or I took Nicole Sax's online course, and it changed my life,
right,
and I'm
right,
so much
right.
better now, you know what I mean?
Th
Like, these institutions, sure, they obviously do a lot of wonderful things that I could never do for people, but we also offer something that honestly they can't do for people now. They could, they just don't do it yet, and hopefully someday they do.
that is well said, and that is a truth. I've heard again and again, and again, people who have gone to some of these institutions that again, are making their best efforts in most cases and are doing some important things, but aren't all the way there. And so that's why I'm excited that Mayo Clinic in particular, which has a publishing arm that publishes independent voices. Right, I'm not at Mayo Clinic. I am not an MD. I'm not a neuroscientist. I have a PhD in the history of ideas, and so I feel equipped as a PhD and a science writer to write about, of course, my own experience, which will be bookending the book, and the wealth of research, some of which you've covered in this podcast, showing that A, so much chronic pain and illness is neuroplastic, and B, that these new targeted therapies really work where other therapies or other treatments don't. And so my book brings together a bit of my personal story, many other people's stories, the stories of many of the pioneers and researchers and practitioners and advocates of neuroplastic recovery, um, because I think it's cool and fun to talk about research through the lives of the people who have brought these ideas forward and changed the world. And so you get a bit of the history of neuroplastic recovery as a movement, almost a social movement. Since history is
Mhm.
my professional training, so it's all of that, and then it's all the research, really nearly all of the crucial research that has given us an understanding that a lot of what Dr. Sarno in the old days theorized has it now been borne out by science, and so that's why I look at it as a bridge from conventional medicine to the new neuroscience and this new paradigm in understanding and treating chronic pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, let's sit with the social movement aspect because something that listeners may or may not know is that Nathaniel did a presentation at was that the first ATNS conference when you did that?
Yeah, it was. It sure was. 2024, just 2 years
Okay.
ago, because 'cause we've had 2 and we're going on
Yeah,
3 in Dallas this fall.
that's right.
Yes,
Yeah, so everybody come to round 3.
right?
We'll both be
It's so
there.
fun.
But truly, I think people in that world really actually know Nathaniel for the, presentation that you did, at that first conference. Like, it really I mean, just people were talking about it, it really made an impact. Um, Nathaniel did a, why don't you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, so I was, because I am a writer and a recovering chronic pain sufferer who had this connection with John Sarno. I wrote a couple pieces about the research that was moving neuroplastic recovery approaches forward, and I wrote one in the Washington Post in 2021 that went viral, or viral-ish. I don't know the definition. We'll say it went viral. It made the rounds,
Good.
and so
Yeah,
for that, I
yeah,
interviewed a lot of the key players, um, at ATNS and on the research front, and so as a result, I was sort of connected with some of those, and most of them were very excited by the piece. Again, it was an effort to bring some mainstream visibility to neuroplastic recovery, which is still, too much on the margins. And so they invited me to present about how to communicate about this issue because it's so important to so many of us who have found that this helps, right? It can be life-saving,
yeah,
and we
yes.
encounter people all the time. I know where, we'll corner someone at a cocktail party who says they have back pain and has gone through the rigmarole, and we'll say, have you considered this approach? And to
Right.
varying responses. And I'm sure we can all
I've never ever had someone be like, "Oh, yes, for sure." The closest I've gotten I mean, maybe some of them even listen to this podcast. Some people have gotten a little close, but I've never had someone pick it up the way that I've picked it up.
right,
Never.
right. Isn't that funny? It's funny. I mean,
I know, I know.
it's a challenge. Well, and so that challenge is
Yeah,
something that, it can be frustrating, but it can be kind of fun. I mean, it's frustrating just because no one wants to see anyone suffer. And when you are handed the
yeah,
keys to feeling better and to an understanding
right,
about your body and your mind and your whole life,
right.
um,
Right, when you know there's a
right,
solution to this and
right,
you don't have to be in
right.
chronic pain, and I
Right.
know, I
And
know.
it can sound religious, which I'm not. We're spreading the good news of the
Yeah,
gospel. I mean, it is good news, but it is rooted very solidly in science and fact and in the stories of
yeah,
thousands, probably millions, of people. So you see people suffering, you see they don't have this information, and you just want to get it to them. And sure, it can become a bit of a crusade, another religious term, but we all try to do it, um, effectively, compassionately, and so forth. But how to do that is a big question that matters. It matters to our personal sort of wish to share this. It also matters to uh, the healthcare system, the American economy,
yeah,
the uh,
yeah.
we spend $600 billion a year either treating chronic pain, usually ineffectively,
Mhm,
and or in
mhm.
lost productivity. $635 billion a year, I think. You
Wow,
have the opioid crisis, addiction crisis, which
yeah,
stems to some considerable degree from the chronic pain epidemic.
Yeah, yeah.
You have suicidality as the result of some people
Yeah.
who have very severe chronic pain and illness that could, in many cases, be treated through this lens, but
Mhm.
it's a tough lens for some people to swallow. So I did a presentation because I cut my teeth on communications in LGBT advocacy with think tanks and organizations that were trying to work in a very sophisticated manner to understand how communication is effective when it comes to changing hearts and
Mhm.
minds and bringing understanding. Again, back to the don't ask, don't tell policy that I worked on using research to advocate for better policy. It was a matter of how do you take something which provokes a lot of resistance and which a lot of
Mhm.
people find impolite or shameful to even discuss, and
Mhm.
find ways to gently, I mean, you're a social worker, so that phrase, meet people where they are, right, is a very effective one
Mhm.
when it comes to communications, because you can't just bunk
Mhm.
people over the head with facts or ideas that they consider a threat or that they consider to conflict with their values. You have to find ways in. And the LGBT movement did this very effectively. It's how I was also involved to some extent in the fight for marriage equality. Again, using
Mhm.
research about communications and public opinion, as well as research about, what the policies of marriage equality and military service equality actually did and did not do. Hint, they
Mhm.
were better for the LGBT people and for society in general, even though opponents of equality had tried to argue the opposite. So I just tried to bring
Mhm.
some of the lessons from that LGBTQ advocacy movement to this movement because I think it's a movement.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, let's sit with
Right,
that
trying to get
because
back to the
first of all,
question.
so no, no, this is great. This is great. So effective. I mean, I think it's important to just name like the difference in my lifetime. I was born in 1988. The difference in my lifetime from when I was in middle school, teenager, in my 20s, now, the difference in the acceptability of being gay is, I mean, it's an outrageous kind of change, truly kind of shocking. And like, people did that, you know?
Mhm.
That's truly amazing. People did that. I'm
That's a great
curious, like,
point, just to pause on your pause. It the If you're not in the thick of it and you don't necessarily, you haven't necessarily followed or taken a course on civil rights or social policy or LGBT advocacy, um, or history and politics in general, you may not realize that, yes, people did that. These things don't just happen. Progress doesn't just happen, as we see in the backlash to so much progress that we're
right,
in right now. It's
right.
something that happens when advocates put their minds to it and their hearts to it and put themselves on the line, and research and knowledge and understanding about, again, how hearts and minds change is a crucial piece of that. So just for instance, one thing that the LGBT movement learned in researching social change itself was that in the early period of what was then called the gay rights movement, there were a lot of street protests, there was a lot of radical um, sort of in your face tactics, much of which was very necessary because there were no other avenues, and we had to get people's attention, around the
Mhm,
early rights movement, around getting visibility for AIDS research and so forth. Um, but at a certain point, that had declining returns, and what was needed was less in your face advocacy where people were demanding rights and demanding the benefits of marriage, and more questions about commonality. So we learn to change our messaging. We learn to use common values to say, we want marriage for the same reasons that you want marriage, which is about love and commitment. It's not for rights and benefits and just for health insurance. The health insurance was a key
mhm,
part of it, but it
mhm,
didn't resonate with people as well when it seemed like people were
mhm.
just jumping up and down saying, we want money and benefits, as it did when we
Right.
said, we too love and we too take care of each other and we want
Mhm,
the rewards and the community affirmation and legal affirmation and support of our relationships, our caretaking relationships, just as straight people have. So that's just an example
mhm,
of how, we can learn to bring specific tactics to how we communicate about neuroplastic pain and treatment so that it is um, not alienating to people, or not as alienating to people, but it leads people from where they are to where we think they'll be when they have full information.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes. As you are, bringing these lessons into the neuroplastic world, like I don't know, like what is there? You know what I mean? What connections do you see? Talk to us about that.
Well, you talked to, I know, Dan Ratner, our board chair, recently,
Yeah, yeah.
um, about what the ATNS is doing on the communications front. Look, there are so many um, people, individuals, organizations, both in the US and abroad, who are trying to figure out the best way to move the needle forward and doing a very good job. You know, the fact that I have a book coming out and that it's at Mayo Clinic, the fact that Howard Schubner has a book coming out too. He's one of the godfathers of the neuroplastic approach in terms of research and practice. Um, a lot of
Yeah, yeah, and let me just I mean, his stuff has really blown up. I mean, I know you said earlier you took a course of his that was at the time sort of like a rinky-dink version
right,
of what he
right.
has now. His I mean, he has a very robust system of courses, trainings for professionals. I've been in, I think 2, maybe 3 trainings that he's done with, like, maybe 100 or more people
Mm,
in there of all different kinds of
mhm,
disciplines. I mean, I'm just saying, painting this picture for people, like, the behind the scenes stuff, if you're not
mhm,
really in the field,
mhm.
is big. I mean, wouldn't you say it's kinda
Yeah, well,
big?
that's exactly what I'm getting at. So his course that I
Right,
took
yeah,
was
yeah.
rinky-dink in the loveliest way, in that it was very low tech, right? So he didn't have a big new website, he didn't have social media, he didn't have various tactics, to get people on board that way. It was a listserv or something, you know. And this wasn't the
Yeah.
1990s. This was 2019. Um, but
Sometimes the best shit comes wrapped in a
exactly,
really rinky-dink
exactly.
packaging, like, you never know.
And it worked. I mean, it worked because this stuff
Yeah,
works, right? So it doesn't matter
exactly.
exactly how
Yeah.
you get to it. What we want is that people get to it. And so, but the behind the scenes, as you put it, that's what I'm getting at, is that a lot of times people in this space, come to us and they're frustrated, including in board meetings at the ATNS. How do we get this out bigger, better, faster? And I sometimes say, we're doing it. One of the reasons that these books have emerged is because some of us were throwing stuff to the wall in an earlier way. Howard's rinky-dink course, my Washington Post piece, which I parlayed into a book proposal. Howard's book also, he was interviewed by someone who had written a book, who was um, in touch with a publisher who got in touch. So there is no magic bullet solution to figuring out either what the message is, or how to message it, or how to amplify it. There is the 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 patient, creative, innovative, voluminous work of talking about this, writing about it, getting the word out, and then hoping, and I think resting assured, you don't rest on your laurels, but you do this work, that more and more people will see it. And then people who have some of the levers of power will see it, and they will help amplify it and bring it into, books or major media, or and eventually policy. So, it's w- we haven't necessarily settled on the perfect message, right? There's always debate, and there's different people emphasizing different aspects. And, is this the mind? Is this the brain? Do we want to say one or the other, or is one going to imply to people that this is all in your head, which is, of course, not what we mean? So there's constant experimentation about message, and I don't know that any one message or approach, in terms of communications, will or should be settled on. But, let a thousand blossoms bloom, and we are at the same time converging around some of the messages and approaches that work to get the word out. I think that's happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do we have a, title yet for the book or
Yes.
a publication date? Oh, yeah,
Yes. Oh, yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Tell us.
The book is called Healing What Hurts.
I
How
love
Now let's see
that.
if I can remember the subtitle. How neuroscience is cracking the mystery of chronic pain.
Oh, that's good.
Came
That
up
is
with
good.
that part. Yeah,
Cracking the
thank
myth.
you.
That's good. No, I think that's really good. I can just see myself as a, mid-20s-year-old seeing that book with my terrible IBS at the time and being like, "Oh, huh. cracking the mystery, because I feel like a lot of people come to this in that exact way, like looking for, okay, I'm going to try this diet, doesn't work. I'm going to try that diet, doesn't work. I'm going to, and depending on your symptom, you're trying different things. But it's like I'm going to try this pill. I'm going to try this solution. I know one thing with IBS that people do that's on the more extreme end is a fecal transplant. So someone's like, maybe I'm going to consider that or actually do it. I mean, certainly people. I bet there's people who listen to this podcast who have done that, and wouldn't that be? I just it's nice. It's very tempting. A book like that is cracking the mystery. I love that.
Right,
I
right,
love that.
because it is so often, too often, a mystery, and, you've been through this,
Yeah.
and you've encountered so many people who a lot of people don't come to it, or at least don't accept it and apply it until they're really hitting rock bottom, until they're really desperate.
Yeah.
Not that people aren't desperate at the beginning of certain chronic pain and illness journeys, but they will go through all kinds of more conventional, or I guess a fecal transplant I don't think of as conventional, but, biomedical approaches before they, and this is such a common and almost amusing story, where, like I said, my recovery was in phases, and there were years in between them where I just thought, well, it's probably the best I can do. This is probably largely mind body, but I don't know what else there is for me to do emotionally. I mean, I thought of myself as pretty emotionally um, awakened always,
Same,
right?
and I was not
But I was not,
correct.
right,
and
right,
it's
that's
and
exact yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah,
that's why it's important to point out all these layers, and the layers
yeah.
between, full consciousness, whatever that is, maybe nirvana, and all the emotional levels beneath consciousness, and they interact with each other, right? They speak to each other, and they resist each other, and they avoid each other, and they summons each other, and so there really is, a shift in, I would say, mindset, but even mindset implies cognitive. There's a shift in sensibility that is often required of this work, where people will come to something, and again, so many. This is, by the way, I think one of the reasons that it's been hard to get this message out, because writers, editors, researchers, policymakers, all these heady folks who are the gatekeepers of the national conversation tend to be excessively in their heads, and to not even have
Mm,
an understanding that there is an emotional world out there, or I should say in there, that's distinct
mhm.
from the cognitive. And so you're trying to sort of convince, these very heady editors and writers, and again, all the sort of elite gatekeepers who pride themselves on and got where they got, by being, um, particularly cerebral and intellectual. And so there are people, I mean, I've had people come to this work and say, "What do they mean, 'open your heart'?" And I'm like, "It's a Madonna song." But I mean, it is a shift in sensibility. It's a softening. It's a
That's such a great, like, gay way of describing
right. I don't
it.
think this person is gay,
Haven't you heard
unfortunately.
the
Right?
song?
Haven't you heard the song? Right?
Wake up.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a platitude, and there are a lot of platitudes here, but they are that for a reason. And so, there is just this sensibility shift that's required of this work, and that's what I was going to say. Is that so often people will hear some tidbit of it. They'll be given the Sarno book, or any other book. It's not all Sarno at this point, um, and either throw it across the room at first in anger,
Yeah.
or thumb through it or read through it and maybe feel a little bit better, and then put it away or forget about it until something else happens. Or they just say, okay, sure, I'm open to this. Maybe it's a little bit of that, but I have this scan, or I have this genetic predisposition, or my mom had whatever it is. And so they spend
Of course.
several more months or years going that route. And I don't begrudge them.
Well,
I
and
just would like
let
to
me just
save them
ver
the
let me
trouble.
just totally, and let me just say that's something that I find very hard about spreading this message, is because, like, you can't really say, like, all of your chronic pain is always TMS and neuroplastic always, because there are in some cases where it's not, and there really are structural issues, and, like, obviously acute pain, sometimes that's a TMS flare up, sometimes it's not. Like, many pains are because of something is actually acutely, like, the danger is actually like a structural problem with your body. But I just think that it makes it so hard to put that message out, to say, like, most chronic pain almost all chronic pain is this. Even if the message is like 99% of chronic pain is this, 99% of people think they're the 1%
That's right. That's
because they're
exactly
like,
right.
oh,
Oh, I've said that line.
it's
That's
so
exactly right.
frustrating.
It is. Well, look, we don't or shouldn't be saying all chronic pain is neuroplastic. I mean, we don't know.
Right,
Some isn't. There's real pain. There's real chronic pain. There's real reasons that pain would persist. If you have cancer, tumor, infection, a shattered bone, or something lodged in your, shrapnel. That right.
right,
What we're saying is we'd like you to understand the way that all pain works is that it's refracted through the brain's interpretation of danger. It is not just a one-to-one, it's not a mechanical like a booby trap, which is what Descartes drew pictures of, where, something would just touch your foot and it would basically pull a rope or push a lever that went all the way to your brain, which then said pain, pain, pain. It's not that. It's a computer system. Your
interesting.
brain is an interpreter, not of whether the signals that it is receiving real signals from your periphery, from your body. But the question of whether those signals are dangerous and therefore your brain creates the sensation of pain is one of interpretation. So neuroscientists are fond of saying pain is an interpretation, which is not to say it's made up or it's imagined or anything like that.
Right, right,
It's to
right.
say that it is your brain's doing. So we do want people to understand that that is what the new neuroscience tells us about how all pain works. But when it comes to chronic pain, the question of whether it's neuroplastic, there are, I mean, or am I at B now or A sub one? Um,
Wherever we're
I
at,
do think,
we're good.
right, if you have pain that has no other explanation or no other good explanation, because the imaging can obviously be wrong a lot and coincidental,
Mhm.
and it's persisted beyond the time that you would normally heal, and you have ruled out other dangerous conditions requiring immediate medical attention, and you have a lot of the personality traits and other histories of people with neuroplastic pain, such as symptoms that come and go and that are not anatomically connected, a history of anxiety, a history of childhood adversity or trauma, then you can pretty much bet that your pain is
Yes,
neuroplastic. And if you ruled out the
yes.
danger, the stuff that requires immediate medical attention, then try this. Right? It's a low
Yes.
barrier to entry.
Yes. I hope listeners, are you taking this in? I hope you're listening because this is good. Let me ask you this. Um, I think this sort of gets back to the idea of like, what's the message with chronic pain? Um, Part of me is like more people need to know about this. I mean, I guess obviously maybe all of me is saying that, but I guess a part of me is saying like if more people just knew, then more people would like pick it up and do this. But another part of me is like there's a reason why people resist it. People are very emotionally defended. I get that myself personally. I see it in other people. Um, I see it in my clients. I mean, it's such a core part of this that I don't know. And to me, it's kind of there's different branches of the work. Of course, like on this podcast, we talk about it as like the psychological work, which is the stuff that's a little more like if you find it, you can implement it, and if you know about it, you can do it. And there's the emotional work, which is more, it's more. It's someone's more likely to resist it, be angry that someone even suggest that they have to do that, be very defended, and so I don't know. I guess I just wonder what you think as you're really getting into like messaging this stuff. Like, what do you think about
I'm
that?
really glad.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just add to that because part of me is like, even if a bunch of people knew about this, they'd still think it was bullshit for no other reason than that they were emotionally defended against it. And they would have some cognitive excuse for why they were defended against, why they didn't like it, but it would really just be they're defended against
That
it. But yeah,
that
what do you
I
think?
think that's exactly right, and the being defended against it is something we, of course, bring compassion to because it's how we work as humans. It's how we protected ourselves, in particular, when we were young from emotions. Again, getting back to the LGBTQ example, it's only one example because we all have this, but there were emotions that were not acceptable, either
Yeah.
because they were scary or because the grief seemed overwhelming or because anger is disconnective, and so society and our parents in subtle ways, even though they might think we yeah, we want to encourage your emotions, whatever they are, actually discourage them. If you're gay and part of your emotions are, love of or desire for the wrong sex, or if you're trans and,
Yeah.
all these, there's many feelings that are unacceptable internally and or externally. And so, um, resistance is just the way of humans. And so it's not enough. It will never be enough to just provide the information. And look, it never has been. I mean, that's why we learn with other social movements that it's not all just a matter uh, "Oh, people don't know and knowledge will set you free." It's a matter of figuring out and finessing ways to get people through the resistance, when and if that's an option, right? So you can lead a horse to water and you can't make them drink, and not everyone is gonna people need to. There's a psychiatry joke here too about how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change itself. So we do need people to agree, to decide, okay, I have at a cognitive level some openness to this, and then I have the will to try it, and to that includes trying to get through my own resistance, first becoming aware that it's a thing, not being so defended with your ego that you insist, "Who, me? I have no resistance. I'm completely an open book." I mean, that's not the case for anyone. So there is a difference between just saying, this is about information and knowledge, and saying this is about um, finding ways to help people navigate the resistance, which is sometimes the whole game, right? We're still dealing with it ourselves. I think you and I and many people who are on
Yeah.
an ongoing journey, because doubt and fear and resistance creep back in sort of around every corner. And what's cool
Mm.
about this work is that it's about teaching you, cultivating skills for how to constantly be aware, to recognize the resistance, to bring compassion to it and say, okay, these defenses, these parts, this resistance emerges for a reason. It's an effort to protect me from things that are scary or that I might not be ready for right now or this morning.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
there is a way through this. If I learn to bring a sense of safety to what I'm doing, I can, you know, gently push it forward, and then basically teach my brain that there are no monsters under the bed, or if there are, I can handle them. So there's work on all fronts, and ultimately, as I know you've recognized and said, it's great for us all to try to bring this information to as many people as can benefit from it, but we also don't want to uh, force people or alienate people or spend our lives and all of our effort trying to change people who aren't, interested in changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well said. Um, do we have a publication date for
Oh,
the
right.
book?
It's January 12th, 2027, which is, I think, just about 8 months, which still seems like a while, but it'll be here before we know it.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can't wait. And certainly, like obviously you'll keep me posted and I will certainly make an announcement on the podcast and we will definitely have you back
Right.
when the book is
I
out so we
will.
can talk all
I
about
will
it.
worm my way
Yeah.
back onto this podcast
Yes.
during the
Yeah, you
rollout.
will.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, let me ask as we're starting to wind down, what any advice that you have for people listening, and you could take this in either direction, either, since we're talking a lot about messaging, and also about like the personal healing.
Mhm.
So if you could take it in either direction, um, advice that you have for people who are listening to this podcast.
Sure. In my book, I talk about the 3 E's of healing, which are education, emotional expression, wherein I've snuck in a second E, and engagement
Mhm. Nice.
or re-engagement in movement and activities that bring you joy, that may have been
Mm.
a source of fear before learning this work. And so the education is primarily what the whole book is about, the neuroscience education. Here's what you need to understand about what is and isn't happening in your body and in your mind, because so much of that is what directly helps your nervous system chill out, which is not a phrase I use in
Yes.
the book, but it just came to mind. And so education and then the emotional work, coming to recognize and express emotions that may have been unavailable to you because they were too scary, and they were, you had defended yourself against them. And then engagement, once you're ready, sometimes in fits and spurts, in movements that may have been scary or painful, and may still be a little bit. And once you've determined that you're free to do those movements, which usually you already are, but you've ruled
Mhm.
out something more serious. Um, as well as engagement socially, engagement with activity like music and dance and travel, all the things. If you're able to bring yourself to do those, um, is that part is not an afterthought. That positive
Mm.
um, kind of activity is really shown in the research to have a big impact on showing your brain that you can do this and bringing joy back to your life, when sometimes it has disappeared. So there's 3 E's in the book, and this part is not in the book, but I think there's a bunch of S's that come to mind when I think of the personal words for healing. I think I mentioned softening. So
Mm.
I was so heady. I still am more heady
Mhm.
than is probably good for me.
I know,
But
same,
just like,
samesies,
and I was
yo,
such a
yeah.
literalist, and I didn't wanna believe in anything that didn't have, eh, you know, absolute evidence and certainty and research behind it, which, by the way,
Totally.
all of this stuff does. So I'm not saying this
Right.
requires a leap of faith, but just like the shift in sensibility, that's needed often to open your heart when you're used to being in your head is a
Yeah.
softening. So a softening, a slowing down, in a sort of mindful way of, let's not rush through every feeling and thought. Let's learn to sit with the discomfort. This is all part of a sort of mindfulness practice that brings awareness to emotions that are then important to get up and out. Um, and self-compassion is the third S, which I kind of use as a verb, self-compassion yourself, or however you would say it. Is
Yeah,
such a
I
key
love
part of it.
that's a nice way to put
And
it.
again, is something that when you're super in your head, and a lot of us are perfectionists and self-critical and internalize the criticism of our parents. Especially this is an issue for LGBTQ folks, but everyone has this
Yeah,
challenge in some way.
yeah,
That
yeah,
self-compassion is a key piece of the puzzle. So those are the 3 S's.
yeah. I love that. I love softening,
And
slowing down, and
self-compassioning,
self-compassioning yourself.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, um, it's just really nice to hear, like, everyone who does this has a slightly different way of saying the same
Right.
basic thing, I mean, I just can't even, as you were saying, like, in re-engage, like, the number of people who have come on this podcast and had some kind of advice in that realm, like, live your damn life. The things that you're afraid to do, like,
Mhm.
do them, even if it's scary. I mean, I mean, like, literally everything you're saying, it's all the same. And so I hope that listeners take comfort in that, knowing that, like, people who are healing from this are all doing slightly different versions of the same
Right,
same
right.
stuff.
That's why I was saying about the communications. There isn't and maybe shouldn't be just one message or one way of saying things, just as there isn't one treatment, right? Everyone has a different
Mhm.
way in. But yes, there is convergence around certain
Yeah.
key concepts, right? That we need to learn to regulate our nervous systems, that our brain more than our
Mhm.
bodies are creating these symptoms, that there is a way to access your brain's fear response and temper it. Um, and so, yeah, I agree. We're all saying versions of the same thing, and different parts will resonate with different people.
Totally, totally. All right, Nathaniel, where can people find you if they wanna read your stuff? Or I don't know, like, where when the book comes out, where do we find
E-
that? Like, where do we find you?
Everything should, I believe, be collected on my website, which is nathanielfrank.com. I am in between social media platforms, so I will probably have one that I'll promote closer to the book rollout, but I will have a piece on my website, which is currently most of my articles and career around LGBTQ issues. But also other political and cultural writing. So all my articles are there and my books are there. And the articles link to the research that I've mentioned here around both LGBTQ stuff and neuroplastic recovery. So nathanielfrank.com is the way to go, and you can email me through that too. It's nathaniel@nathanielfrank.com, but there's an option there on the website.
Awesome. So it's all on the website, and that will be in the show notes. So folks, if you're interested, it'll all be right there.
And I just want to say, I'm just as you know, because I tell you all the time, I'm an avid listener and champion of your podcast. I just really think that you model how to be authentic and bring yourself to this work and put yourself out there. And it's inspiring. So I'm really delighted to be part of it now formally.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your support of the podcast. You were one of the first people to ever leave a review. So reminder to folks listening, if you would like to support the podcast and support this work, I would be honored to get another review from you listening as well. And Nathaniel was one of the first, and it's really nice when we can get together and like talk about what's on the podcast and all that, because I know that you listen to it, and I really appreciate
it's
that.
fun. And leaving a review turns out to be so easy, so why not?
Thank you. This is what I've been saying.
Right.
I'm like,
it
folks.
takes 2 minutes. I usually add it to my my list of things to do. I'm like, I can get to that in 3 weeks. No, it takes 2 minutes. Do it.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Much, much, much appreciation.
Thank you, Sean. It was as fun as I hoped, and I look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. Yep. And we'll definitely have you back when the book comes out. Say the title one more time.
Healing What Hurts. How I always pause at the subtitle. How neuroscience is cracking the mystery of chronic pain.
Cracking the mystery of chronic pain. Love it. Love it. And for everybody listening, this has been Mind Body Medicine for Chronic Pain, and I will talk to you next week. If you're looking for a therapist, you found one, and you can decide. Does my vibe resonate with you? Therapy is an opportunity. Therapy is an opportunity to tune into you, to learn to feel more comfortable being yourself, to feel more comfortable with your emotions, and to feel more comfortable existing in the world in your body. Do you have difficulties in your life? Maybe it's chronic pain, maybe it's something else. Maybe you want to become a person who likes yourself. Do you want a therapist to help you? And would you like me to get to know you and to help you? That is actually an option. You can find me at SeanHershey.com or MindBodyMedicineForChronicPain.com. Both go to the same place, and if you're looking for me, I'd welcome a message from you. SeanHershey.com, MindBodyMedicineForChronicPain.com, and you can request a free consultation.